Hello, I'm Craig Souser. I'm the president of JLS Automation. Automation to me has been around a long time, and it's certainly changed. It's grown from the days of mechanization into relay logic, into PLCs, into all types of different processor-based logic systems for machinery.
Hello and welcome to This is Automation. I'm your host, Corey Dallas, and we're excited to have you with us today. So today we're going to be talking with Craig Souser from JLS Automation. We're going to be talking about packaging automation and specifically in the food industry. And we're going to be learning a lot about JLS and some of their machines and how they differentiate with technology, robotics, and automation. Thanks for joining us, Craig.
You're welcome. Great to be with you.
So Craig, to get us kicked off, I wanted to talk a little bit about you before we start talking about technology and JLS. So could you give everybody a quick introduction to yourself and your background?
Sure. So my father, Joseph Souser, was the founder of JLS, started the company back in 1955. I grew up quite literally in the business. It was in our home. So this is all I've ever really known in terms of profession. I certainly enjoy what I do, seeing the company through a lot of times of change, a lot of times of turmoil and tumultuous markets, lots and lots of challenges. Today, of course, we're challenged with COVID, as many companies are, all companies are, and dealing with that. But, I love what I do. I really enjoy the people I work with, especially when I see them, just not as much as I'd like. And I think JLS has a great future based on where we are in the space we're serving.
Excellent. So I think you may have already answered this, but can you talk about what your first exposure to automation and robotics was, and maybe how that kind of informed the path that JLS has taken over time?
Yeah, my first exposure to robotics, which really was some of my early exposure to automation, was back in the early 80s, dating myself a bit, but we represented Toshiba as a manufacturer way back when, and they had, of course, PLCs and mostly known for their drives and motors, but they also had robots, and we tried to market those for a period of time, and I think we were a bit early. We were a bit naive. The markets weren't really ready yet. They had a pretty good offering, as it turns out, but not even sure where that whole product offering stands. But it was a good opportunity to learn about the industry that was developing at that point, changing rapidly, and certainly became an industry that was dominated by robots made outside the United States.
So can you talk about, JLS as a company and kind of the market that you play in and some of the technology that you use?
Yeah, as a company today, we're focused almost exclusively on the food industry. Once in a while, we'll get pulled into another application where our basic technological offering has value for someone, but we do a lot in meat, poultry, cheese, areas where high sanitary construction is important. That is part of how we differentiate. We are known for our hygienic design of equipment and knowledge of how to handle tooling and vision systems and everything else associated with the type of robotics that we offer for food packaging automation. We do work in the primary packaging space as well as secondary packaging, but everything we do is stainless. Everything we do is aimed at handling food safely, and most of it is done at relatively high speeds.
Can you give us a quick explanation of the difference between primary packaging and secondary packaging for those that may not be familiar with those terms?
Sure. So primary packaging, honestly, is just that. It's the initial way that the product, whether that's slices of meat or cheese, hamburger, whatever it is going to get safely contained and create a barrier for food safety. Could be as simple as a flow wrap or an over wrap. Could be, a vacuum pack package or a map tray. But it's put into some type of container or wrapping that is going to preserve it and protect it mainly from oxygen and allow it to be shelf stable and fresh and safe to the consumer. Secondary packaging, on the other hand, is taking those wrapped items and either putting into something like an intermediate storage unit or device container, like a carton. Lots of our products are carton in today's packaging, and but in all cases they end up in some kind of a shipper or a case, which is usually corrugate. Sometimes they're plastic trays like bread, but it's that secondary packaging operation that really allows something to get protected for shipment or protected for display on a shelf, so that it can go out to the consumer.
So can you talk a little bit more about the markets that you serve? Where might someone see a JLS machine actually being used? What kind of facility?
Yeah, so we're in a lot of USDA regulated facilities. I really shouldn't mention any names, but some names that are household words or strong or household brands, strong regional players that it's very common these days for our team all over the country to walk into their local grocery store and look in the baked goods area, look in the meat counter, the meat chests, and see items that we've helped package or put into a case for shipment.
Excellent. So there's a really interesting video about the history of JLS that was somewhat recently posted. I think part 2 may have just come out. And it talks about the origins of JLS, obviously founded by your father, which you've already mentioned. One of the interesting things that I took away from that is that you said that one of the most memorable sayings that you remember from your father is, at the end of the day, all you have left is your reputation. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then, as a secondary question, how does that, impact the way that you lead JLS and the way that JLS operates?
Yeah, well, obviously for me to remember it all these years later, it did leave a lasting impression. So, but I think it speaks true to this day that your reputation is so important as an individual. Speaks to your integrity as a person, as a company. Doing the right thing, serving the customer, looking after their interests. Sometimes even when their interests are going to have to outweigh yours for longer term relationship reasons. So we've worked hard to keep the reputation strong and the brand equity strong in the same way. And today I reinforce that with our team with a couple anecdotes that we use. One of which is the single most important order we ever get from any customer is the second one, because that means our reputation within their walls has grown strong, and they're rewarding us with more business. Repeat business is much easier to acquire than new customers, so we cherish that. And another anecdote that I like to quote is from the folks at Harley Davidson when they turned that business around way back when they asked 2 questions that if answered properly, I think are very instructive. And they are, what do you want your customers to say about you? And what are you willing to do to get them to say it? So I challenge our team to think about those thoughts and those questions frequently in statements, and believe in that, and really wear that as we interact with our customer base.
So I wanted to kind of stay here for a minute. You mentioned, some of the anecdotes that you share with your team on a regular basis. Can you talk about, from a leadership perspective, how do you make sure that, this kind of cultural ideology that has come to embody, JLS as a company, how do you make sure that, as you scale and grow with more team members, how do you make sure that stays a core focus?
Yeah, and that is a concern. We worry about our culture getting diluted with new folks coming in and not always knowing if they're going to truly embrace it or not. So one of the many steps in our continuously evolving onboarding process is that all of our new team members attend a session that we call JLS 101, and I do that. I go through our history, our values, our commitment to them, what we expect from them, and I share, these thoughts, these statements, and so they hear it essentially from day one, or let's say week one, but then it's repeated, and it's something we talk about quite a bit. We want to make sure they embrace it. We want to make sure they're wearing it, and that it's noticeable for our customers and partners and people that, are suppliers that are important to us, that we interact with them in a fair way, in a way that they enjoy doing business with us, and want to continue that relationship.
Excellent. So let's talk about the food packaging industry as a whole for just a second. Can you just give us an idea of what the automation and technology landscape is like? And maybe as a follow-on to that, do you feel that it's very technologically advanced or a little behind? What's your impression?
I think when you talk about robots specifically, food packaging still has a long way to go versus certainly if you contrast it to, number one, the automobile industry, which is heavily mechanized from a robotic standpoint, or things like semiconductor or assembly operations for, cell phones and that kind of thing. So within the food space, some of the segments like confectionery have, generally speaking, been pretty well automated. Not saying there aren't large opportunities going forward in those spaces either, but the meat industry, poultry, cheese, certainly not as much. They're historically have relied on very tight ROI requirements or high thresholds that make automation hard to justify for them. At least historically, that has certainly changed in the last few years. So I think the use of robots is new to a lot of our customer base. The vast majority of our new customers are still customers that have very limited use of robotics in their facilities. So many cases, it's the first time that they've deployed a robot, and we need to really support them through that process.
So you say that there's some parts of the food packaging industry that they're a little more advanced than others. Can you talk about why that is and why you're seeing a shift in those, traditionally not so heavily automated with robotics and such? Can you talk about why there's a shift right now?
Yeah, I mean, the shift's going on now because 4 or 5 years ago, labor on these lines to operate these lines became increasingly difficult to find. Everybody again was concerned about ROI and trying to get payback in 12, 14 months, which can be very difficult for certainly high advanced automation technology. Now, and again, the last several years, it's become almost crisis level that lines are understaffed, facilities are understaffed, and I'm including temporary workers in those categories. So it's difficult to operate at full capacity in many cases, and that's not only just lost opportunity. Sometimes it can be the difference between making money and not making money in the food industry. The food industry generally operates on razor thin margins, so a few percentage points in either direction can really be a major difference on the performance of any organization.
Yeah, I think we've seen that issue of skilled labor coming up more and more often, not just in food packaging, but in pretty much every industry. How do you think that the kind of global pandemic situation that we're in right now has changed that or accelerated that? What's been the response from your customers?
Well, what we're hearing more and more is, and it's impacted both sides of the equation. On the supply side, you have people that were working in these food plants, and the meat industry in particular seems to have gotten the real brunt of this, and I think there are some reasons for that. But the people were afraid, and they're still afraid. They've seen instances where there's been wide-scale outbreak of the virus. They're working in close proximity to one another. They're in a cold, wet environment, which the virus seems to like. And, a lot of people get infected and they don't want to come back to work. On the other side, everybody that walks through those doors for the meat companies or these food companies is a risk. And you can't tell with the asymptomatic problems that this virus is presented if someone's sick or not necessarily. So, we're finding ways obviously to do more testing, but mitigating that risk is something that automation offers.
Absolutely. So maybe as a follow-on to that, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing the packaging industry right now, specifically food packaging? Is it what you just said, or is there something else?
I think the number one challenge for them going forward is going to be people, labor. Again, it was a challenge pre-COVID. It's created an even bigger desire to remove people from some of these operations. But right behind that, actually finding how to deploy automation from a technical execution perspective. But in most cases, the biggest challenge we are faced with our customers is space. They have not even thought about automation when they've laid these lines out. Some of these plants, again, especially in the meat industry, are old. Space is at a huge premium. Operating in a USDA kind of environment where you're washing down and sanitizing is, daily as they must. It just requires space to be minimized. And unfortunately, automation takes room. It's not always a whole lot more room than people, but it can be in terms of, feeding product to a line and taking it away. So we've been challenged with that and tried to make our solutions very compact, have a minimal footprint, be easy to maintain, be easy to clean, because these environments are space challenged and challenged environmentally.
So how does hygienic design come into play in the types of systems that you're building? And do you feel that can hinder the adoption of technology? Maybe there's something available, but you can't find a way to get it into a hygienic form factor.
The challenge that we've had is the ability to try to eliminate parts and eliminate mechanisms so that by definition, it's more hygienic. And one of the ways that companies like JLS has done that is with the use of vision guidance and not having to form patterns and form all the products into some kind of an arrangement to pick and place it. We can do that with the camera, with the robot, targeting it properly, and just allow for a simpler system, which in many cases is smaller. But by nature, it's easier to make something that's less complicated hygienic.
So how do you see future technologies, more advanced robotics that are maybe leveraging machine learning and AI? How do you see those playing a role in the future of manufacturing and the future of food packaging?
Yeah, my belief is that AI, machine learning, they're not exactly the same thing, but very closely coupled. That's the next big frontier for automation in general, and I think robotics. There are barriers to it. It's not trivial. It's coming a long way, and it's in our everyday lives. We're interfacing with AI technology in many forms, literally on a daily basis in our homes. Trying to move it into the robotics space means that I'm probably not going to be able to use something that's in the cloud and remotely accessed. I'm probably going to need to have it embedded in a machine controller. That machine controller may not have the horsepower required to execute these incredibly advanced technologies and bandwidth associated with them. So I think, some way of getting that compressed and in a smaller form factor in terms of size and memory usage and bandwidth, again, to allow it to happen at the machine level. I'm sure that's coming. When that happens, I think the opportunities become endless. I think it'll simplify some of our processes, simplify some of the challenges our customers are faced with. I'm really excited about it, but I don't think it's right around the corner. I think there's still much work to be done, and it's got to be done by, I think, some larger companies, maybe some chip manufacturers in conjunction with the technology solutions providers.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you see as maybe the lowest hanging fruit, either at a data analytics level or at a machine level, as far as applications for machine learning or AI?
So I think the low hanging fruit pretty much has to tie to the technology that's available today, and that technology that could be implemented and is being implemented in some forms today would be off-site. It would be sending data to an analytic engine, having it crank through its process and algorithms and come back with either automatic or at least some action for an engineer or an operator to take on a machine. In most cases, that's going to be aimed at, a lot of this is aimed at improving OEE, but, if it's done in an automatic way and method, then those optimizations could be done without human intervention. But it's going to mean taking data, collecting it, exporting it, cranking it, bringing it back in whatever fashion to be implemented, as opposed to being on the machine and having, the machine processor itself do some of those processes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen some early adopters of, these machine learning and AI applications. I know there's some, robotics pick and place applications to handle a more adaptive approach to pick and place, some things like that. But rolling that out on a larger scale seems to me, at least, to be a little bit further down the road. And then we'll see these data analytics applications that maybe aren't directly tied to machine control, but are somewhat tangentially tied. And I think the other thing I'd be interested to get your opinion on is, I think in general, the industrial automation and manufacturing sector is a little resistant to change for good reason, for operational reasons, supply chain reasons, to make sure that there's robustness in the system, but also for safety reasons. How do you interpret that?
Well, I totally agree with you. At times I'm frustrated by that rigidity, that resistance to change, but from all the points you made, especially safety, you have to celebrate it. That we're not changing constantly and running the risks that might be associated with that, as well as just supply chain, as you mentioned, and long-term support and the ability to get parts ongoing can really be tough if you just keep evolving every time a new processor comes out. But it does mean, by definition, that we're going to follow, not lead, in the area of these significantly advanced technologies like machine learning.
All right, so wanted to kind of shift, while it is fun to talk about the future of technology, I wanted to shift more to some things that we're actually seeing in the field today. I think JLS has invested pretty heavily in robotics and robotic solutions and developed what I would call some very impressive systems. So can you talk about what makes something a good application for robotics? And as a secondary part to that, has that answer changed over the years as far as what was a good robotics application 5, 10, 20 years ago versus what is a good application today?
Yeah. So, it has changed in terms of what was, I'd say, viable. Again, some of it becomes, what's worth the investment. Certainly in our space with the use of Delta robots, we've seen, for example, the payloads change. They've gotten much higher. So we can now pick up more products, more packages at one time, or multiple pick strategies, and reduce the number of robots. So the investment goes down, the space limitation or space requirement diminishes, and voila, we have an application that prior to that we just couldn't address, and now we can answer it. The use of hygienic robots, like we use, certainly opened up people's eyes and opened up the possibility of putting them in, somewhat nasty environments from a chemical and hot water, high pressure spray area. So that makes them more compelling and easier and safer to implement. You're not going to destroy them like you may have with a robot from 10 years ago.
So can you talk about what do you think is the most important differentiator for JLS from the perspective of automation and robotics?
Probably the number one thing, as we've talked, our hygienic design is important to our customer base, but I think more important than that is our experience. We've been doing this high-speed picking since 2002. We're now good at it. I can say that with confidence. Doesn't mean we're perfect. We still have our challenges and make mistakes, but we've got a really strong library of designs, of knowledge, a very strong group of people here with experience to grow from. And that keeps us out of trouble. It keeps our customers out of trouble. The worst thing for robotics in any space, especially ours, is that bad project and poorly executed, maybe an inappropriate use of whatever technology, and that can set back the implementation of this advanced technology for a decade or the career of the people involved. So we're cautious in our approach. We're very, very upfront and candid with our customers about what we believe is feasible. And I think that has paid off well. We've had a number of customers say to us, well, wow, you're the first company that ever told us that. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. And you're right. Let's not go down that road. Let's make sure, again, on maybe a first application, we hit a home run and we build from that and not try to take on a moon launch.
Absolutely. So let's talk specifically about the Peregrine Carter, which is one of JLS's newest machines, or maybe the newest machine. Can you talk a little bit about what makes this machine different and some of the technology that enables that?
Yeah, we've been involved with cartoning and done cartoning applications for a long time, but it's never been a big part of our business, and we did not want to enter that space with a Me Too kind of strategy. So I had a lunch meeting in the spring of last year, and one of our application business development people shared a concept with me that essentially is based on track technology. And I came back and announced to our engineering team that we were going to develop this project or this product and, turn it into a fast track project, which we did. We targeted it specifically with some knowledge we had about where some gaps were, some struggles with cartoning applications in spaces we were familiar with, and felt it also would open up opportunities for us within the general spaces that we were trying to operate. We wanted to make sure whatever we did with cartoning was true to our core principles of simple design, trying to avoid complex mechanical solutions. And the Peregrine has certainly achieved that, but it has a very small footprint. It eliminates a lot of conveyor transitions and conveyors in the process. It actually simplifies the control scheme because of that, and it has incredibly fast changeover time. So we're very excited about its future, as well as our customers are.
How do you manage the interplay between risk and innovation?
Yeah, well, certainly, JLS, we've been on the bleeding edge in our past. We don't want to be there again. We like to be on the leading edge, but leading edge and bleeding edge are one letter apart. So you need to be careful with that. We wanted to make sure that we could control the launch, control the development of the machine, so that we did it in a way that we could support it, our customers could embrace it, and that the technology, while new, was robust enough to stand the operation environment that our customers have.
Can you talk a little bit about how you approach a new machine development? Is it centered around an idea that someone has, or is it specifically focused on pains that you've identified in the market? And is that process of innovation repeatable, or something that is, luck or chance?
Well, it's been a mixture. The Peregrine, as I mentioned a little bit before, was somewhat spur of the moment, but it came from someone's knowledge of an application area that had developed over decades. So it wasn't by any stretch a shot in the dark. We had a lot of discussions about how big the market was and how what part of it we felt we could serve with the Peregrine. We recently introduced a vertical pack capability with our Osprey case packer. So it can convert from horizontal to vertical pack and back very quickly. And that's something where we studied that requirement, listened to our customer base. We're far from the first company to offer that. I think what we've done with the Osprey, again, is pretty unique. It's very compact, very simple to change over. And what we've seen in competitive offerings, it's a winner in that regard. It's going to allow it to go into applications that other vertical pack, horizontal pack machines could not do. But that was an instance that was much more deliberate. It was part of a ongoing process of evaluation. When we developed our Osprey Flex, what we call Osprey Flex machine, we developed it over a period of years, and we developed, of course, a concept first, and that concept became not jello, but it got molded many times. It changed many times. We developed a matrix internally of what application areas the Osprey Flex could address, should address, and targeted the design after those areas that we felt best dovetailed our current offering and best fit in the markets we served. And it wasn't just a vertical machine for the sake of having that capability, but more it was going to help our customer base take some next steps with, retail ready or vertical pack requirements that they're seeing more and more.
So there's definitely been some exciting new developments with the Peregrine and with the Osprey, using new technology, new robotics, new vision systems, the long-stator linear motor systems, all really exciting stuff. But I'm curious to know what's coming next for JLS and for the future of packaging.
Yeah. So, what we've done with the Peregrines specifically is in what we've called a phase one development, where it's a loading solution integrated with track that's integrated to a variety of different formers. We have a couple preferred vendors or partners that we work with on the carton forming. But what we're working on at the moment, and what we think we're close to getting our first order for, is a robotic closer that will allow us to eventually make the Peregrine machine a monoblock kind of solution, and again, keep it very compact and allow it to go in places where other cartoning technologies are just not able to go because they're just too big, if for no other reason.
So if people want to learn more about JLS, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, the easiest thing to do is go on our website, which is jlsautomation.com. We always appreciate, any questions people have, and we're anxious to answer them. We are on all the social media sites as well, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. So certainly you can connect to us through there, but the best place to get us is the website.
Awesome. Do you have any closing thoughts to share with the listeners about JLS or about any of the topics that we've discussed today?
Well, I think, from our standpoint, because of everything going on with COVID, our value proposition to our customers is increased. So, we're very bullish about the future of our company and our people. We know our customers need more of what we provide them. They have plenty of challenges today to deal with, but long term, I think it's in a good place. And I think automation in general is going to just continue to grow. As we talked earlier, machine learning and AI getting incorporated into machinery and all the opportunities that brings along makes the automation space very exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Craig, for joining this conversation. Appreciate having you on.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
All right, everybody, we have some amazing episodes lined up, both technical topics and interviews with thought leaders in automation, robotics, AI, and IIoT. You'll definitely want to make sure you keep an eye out for those. So the best way to do that is to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to check out the YouTube channel by searching This Is Automation in YouTube. If you enjoyed the podcast, please let us know by leaving a review and a comment on Apple Podcast or YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time on This Is Automation.